we still get back to this whole topic of executive presence, and it's floated around in a lot of associations. They talk about, gaining executive presence and more gravitas and everything else. But for you, from where you sit, and I know
Mm.
you deal with some pretty big organizations and sales directors and etc., what are some of the misconceptions you found around executive presence, and how do you feel other people can work to overcome them?
I think COVID changed a lot of that, unfortunately, for the worse, I think. What I mean by that, Julie, and I know you and I have probably had this conversation over a coffee, but I feel that there's this misunderstanding that substance beats style, and that's all that really matters. So it doesn't really matter what I wear
Mm.
because of the level of seniority that I represent, the amount of commercial credibility that I have, my credentials should speak for themselves. What comes out of my mouth is gold, so therefore I can wear, a puffer jacket to an executive meeting. Those sorts of things, I think, were some of the unfortunate outcomes of lockdown when we became so used to being at home. We kind of threw out a lot of those rules. Now, some of that was lovely. Some of it was beautiful in the sense that we became a bit more real. We became a bit more vulnerable. We became a little bit more open to letting people into our lives outside of the office because we were in
Mhm.
this kind of environment,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
But when we come back into kind of a little bit more of a business as usual environment, one of the things that I think we need to accept is the reality that people won't be able to hear anything that comes out of your mouth if they don't want to. If the first impression that they get from you is, and it's all subconscious. So if I ask somebody, they go, "Oh, I'm not like that. I don't judge people on what they wear," or, "Oh no, I don't." Well, they might not think that they do, but there is significant evidence scientifically to suggest that that first minute is the evaluation point for somebody to determine whether or not they're going to open up to somebody to hear what they say. Then
Mhm.
from that point on, it really is about what it is that they say over what they look like. But if you don't show up in a way that is representative of the credentials that you put forward or of the experience that you have, and then you're complaining that no one's taking you seriously, it's important to then understand how the human brain works and work with it rather than against it and wish that it was something other than what it was. So I think that that's one of the big misnomers, I think, of executive presence, because it's really important. The other thing I would like to say, Julie, and it's just my personal opinion, but I think it relates to my philosophy around how I like to show up in the world. It's not that I walk around with a mirror in front of me every day. So once I leave the house, I might not look at myself again until I get in the car on the way home or at home.
Mhm.
But everyone else has to look at me. So I try to make that as pleasant as possible, so that it's pleasing, so that there's something that's pleasing. It's similar with my home. I like to kind of have area as I look around my home, I like to see things that make me happy,
Mm.
that are pleasing to the eye. And so, I'm never going to be Elle Macpherson. I've been very aware of that my whole life. I'm never going to be, on the cover of a magazine, but I can really work with what God's given me and make sure that I'm as reasonable to other people's eyes as I can possibly be, and that's really being about being conscious.
Yeah,
Uh,
about being conscious, but I think there's also a level of self-respect as well.
yeah,
Um,
true.
and setting standards for yourself. What are you prepared, what level are you prepared to go to, and what level are you prepared not to go down to?
Right.
When you're leaving the house in the morning, because if you can maintain a certain standard, I think irrespective of what's going on around you, I think that also carries you through. And I guess you've seen this too. I don't know if you educate sales teams on this particular topic when you're going through your training, but what are the sorts of things you've seen in the work that you do in organizations with the visual component of their whole presentation? Because you'd be working with some companies that have to do some pretty big pitches, I would imagine.
Well, that's exactly right, and it's interesting because it's such a fraught topic. How do you have the conversation with somebody about the dead skin cells that are down the front of their jumpers, for example? How do you have a conversation with somebody who hasn't brushed their hair? How do you have a conversation with somebody who has dandruff all over the back of their top? How do you have the conversation with somebody who hasn't paid attention to their personal hygiene? I mean, again, I think that there's some of the hangovers from lockdown that,
Do you think
have
it
caused.
was just lockdown, or was it there beforehand as well?
Well, I don't know, but I have seen it far more with far more prevalence since lockdown. There's been a casualization, I think.
Totally, I agree.
Yeah, not just in the workforce. I mean, it started with sneakers, being okay to wear. And look, I'm all for that too. Because I'm so short. Um, I've always worn heels, but it's nice every now and again to wear a pair of sneakers. That said, would I wear a pair of sneakers into a client's office? No, I wouldn't. Would I wear that to a first meeting with somebody? Absolutely not. So yeah, but there's been a real casualization. So I don't know. I don't know whether these people ever had that level of self-care, self-awareness, self-respect. I don't know. But it's a tricky conversation, and I see that as recently as the other week. I had to pull the head of sales aside and say, you might want to have a talk to that person over there because they've got all the, dead skin cells sort of down the front of them. And the person was absolutely divine, like gorgeous person, really good at what they did, but was really letting themselves go. And I think the argument in that person's mind was, well, I'm only meeting with this sort of a role, which is kind of heavy industrial. It's not going to matter.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I used to do a lot of work in corporate uniform, and even, I mean, they used to bring you in to sharpen up, the people that were going out to represent the company, because it was important. They didn't want the company to be seen as a shabby, sort of backyard sort of operation. Not that it was huge organizations.